Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to a panel that I know that you are going to enjoy, and I'm inviting you to be active participants in a session that's going to focus on establishing conditions for innovation that will ensure that our learning systems are more powerful and more successful. Thank you very much indeed. It's great that we've got that level of support this afternoon. Just before I ask our eminent and illustrious panel to introduce themselves, can I welcome you all to what in effect is a theatre in the round. We recognise that our backs are turned to some of you, but there'll be moments where we are having a conversation together in what effectively is a fishbowl, and other times when we're opening out to a conversation with everybody in the room. So Florence, would you please start? And your microphone is right beside you.
I'm quite happy to be there. So my name is Florence Robin. I'm Director General of Education in France. That means I'm managing all educational system in France, that be pre-primary, primary, and secondary education in terms of curriculum, teacher training, and also vocational teaching and assessing, and so on, and a lot of things, as you can imagine. First of all, I'm not a politician. I'm not a specialist of administration. I'm a teacher. I grew up in the suburbs of Paris, which is not a so rich area, and which in a place when it's not so easy to for every child to attend higher education. Then I was a teacher, physics teacher, and I become can say something like an expert on pedagogical strategies. And then I was in charge of, I became a territorial director of education in some very deprived areas of France, even in South America, because we have some territories in South America, as perhaps you know, in French Guyana, for example. And it makes me very attentive or accurate on our main problem, I think, in France. That's about inequality. Because I think because of the cultural basis of the teacher and the whole society, we are too much focused about excellence and the search of on an elite. And so our main, I think, challenge is how to attend both excellence, which is very important in this globalized world, and equity, especially for children from deprived areas with low socio-cultural background, for example, and the migrants, which are very numerous in France. Perhaps you know that too. So,
wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Hallgart, and I work for the RSA, which is probably best described as probably the world's oldest think and act tank. We've been having great ideas and putting them into action for over 250 years now. I run our education program, which is focused on closing the creativity gap. I started my professional life as a teacher, like you, Florence, but what got me into teaching in the first place was outdoor education. Before I was teaching, my first, as an educator, I was taking people not much younger than myself into the wilds of Wales and Scotland, camping and climbing, and that really informed my development as a teacher. When I left teaching, I did quite a lot of work around creativity and arts education, including leading one of the WISE Award winners in 2011 Creative Partnerships. I think what unites arts education and outdoor learning, and it's one of my passions at the moment, is that both rely on valuing unpredictable outcomes. You can't do outdoor education well and you can't do arts education well unless you're prepared to value unpredictable outcomes. And what I see around the world in every education system are really valuable quests to make systems more reliable more reliable in terms of quality, access, making sure all girls are educated. Those are really valuable. But what I worry about is how we can make sure that we can have education systems that are reliable but are still unpredictable for learners. And why that is so important is I think some element of unpredictability is at the heart of the engagement challenge that every education system faces.
Brilliant. And Joe, just you've got a copy of the report there. If we just hold that up as Exhibit A, yeah? So RSA, in partnership with the Innovation Unit in London, have produced a report. It's a draft report.
It's an interim report, so it's half-formed rather than half-baked, but we're looking for your help in shaping the next version of this. Both ideas around recommendations, but also ideas of examples, practical case studies, and strategies that we can bring to bear on this.
So today's conversation will inform that work. That version is already on the WISE website,
yes.
So people will be able to access it, and there are a limited number of copies, I think, this afternoon as well, that people might be able to access. Okay, fine. Gilbert.
Happy to be here as well. So my name is Gilbert Doumit, or Gilbert. I'm coming from Lebanon. Effectively, I'm the product of war. I lived my first 17 years in a war zone. I used definitely to go to school 3 or 4 months a year. Probably life has been the school, my best education journey. Until I grew up, I was a school teacher as well. I used to teach science. I think it was it was a terrifying experience how education systems in countries in the Arab world, in my own country, how they destroy possibilities, how they shape our behaviors in a way that do not prepare us neither to society nor to business. Now I'm a managing partner of a consulting firm that does policy and public management consulting. We work across the Arab world and the MENA region, and more specifically in countries that are in transition or that are in conflict. So we believe that violence, unemployment, poverty are not, we're seeing the symptoms of the problem, the root cause of education. We believe that the root cause of the problems of this part of the world, and probably all over the world, is education. Our education systems do not prepare us to live in society in harmony, in cohesion, as citizens, and do not prepare us to be entrepreneurs, to be productive, to be active human beings in our society. And this is why we work on a 3-pronged strategy across the region. One thing, we try to assist public institutions and governments in having education institutions more responsive to society and business. We've been working with many universities in engineering programs, social entrepreneurship programs, civic engagement programs that are anchored in the context in Tunisia, in Yemen, in Libya, in Iraq, in Lebanon, previously in Syria, as well as in the Gulf countries. The second component, the second strategy is we believe teachers are at the core of education transformation. We do a lot of capacity building in experiential and entrepreneurial learning for teachers and professors in universities, public and private. And the third component is how can we improve the management systems of education institutions? Because in many cases, the management systems are not equipped to innovation. I was talking to someone this morning and she was saying, you know, you want me to be innovative, Sabine, a Lebanese entrepreneur. She was telling me, I'm expected to be innovative. There is nothing in my education that was innovative, from the classroom to the management system. So why do you expect me to be one? And this is where we're focusing on in the region.
Thank you, Gilbert. This is going to be a great debate. You're ready for him. Okay. Sharath.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharath Jeevan, the CEO and founder of Stir Education. But I actually wanted to introduce someone much more interesting than myself today. A boy called Praveen, who is a young boy growing up in Uttar Pradesh, in India, India's biggest state. And 6 years ago, Praveen became one of the first kids in his village to be able to go to school. And you know, almost 100% of kids in India now are enrolled in primary school. It's remarkable. But 6 years later, Praveen found himself like most kids. He was unable to read a single paragraph in his own language. he couldn't add or subtract two numbers. And on that final day of school, Praveen's father, who had never been to school himself, finally had the courage to walk into his classroom and speak to Praveen's teacher. And he said, "You failed me. I thought my son's life would be better than mine." To which Praveen's teacher simply shrugged his shoulders and replied, "The son of a donkey will always be a donkey. The son of a donkey will always be a donkey." Praveen's one of 250 million children like that now across the developing world. I have a son almost the same age as Praveen now. And there's a real risk, I think, that kids who in India, for example, were once untouchable are being written off by teachers as unteachable. It's really the civil rights issue of our time. That's why I do now.
Sure, thank you very much. Colleagues, for many of us in this room, this conversation with everybody is what WISE is about. We are going to place innovation at the heart of our conversation and ask the question, how can we ensure that we can establish the conditions for innovation that in turn will ensure that our learning systems become more productive, more inclusive, both, as you say, Florence, excellence and equity. Yep, that's what we want to talk about. My name's Anthony McKay, and I've got the good fortune to attempt to moderate this panel. And you can see it's going to be a challenge. Let me just explain that we'd like to have this conversation in three parts. The first part, we want to ask each of the panel members to articulate, as you see it, the case for innovation. What is the case for innovation? And can you give us a couple of examples from your current work where your own vision of a learning system that is rich in innovation, some examples from your current experience where you can see some of that coming to reality already? In other words, let's be positive about the way in which our systems are becoming more innovative, even though we've got big challenges. Yep. And at the end of that session, I'm going to open up the room to everybody. I'll privilege those people who are out there. Yeah? Okay. And then you can ask questions, make comments. The panel is not going to try and respond and address every question. But at the end of some participation, I will give them the opportunity to pick up on any point, any challenge that they would like to. Part two, I'm going to ask the panel if you only had 2 or 3 priorities at your disposal, 2 or 3 actions that you could seriously implement, what would they be in order to get a more innovative learning system? Okay, and we'll talk about, I think in that context, are we talking about transforming our learning systems? Is it through innovation that we achieve the kind of transformation that we want? Or are we talking about very serious innovation that helps to accelerate improvement of our system? Or are we talking about both? It would be good to get a sense of where all of you feel we should be putting our energy. Some are in the business of incremental change, others are in the business of radical change. So it will be interesting to see where you are. Yep. And then, again, I'll call for your contributions. And then part 3, most of us know that if you've been coming to WISE for the last 5 years or more, or in fact if you're in the opening plenary, the challenge for all of us is implementation of policies. We can have fantastic policies, but what are the enablers and the barriers? And there I mean everything from our political systems, yeah, our policy frameworks, the partnerships that we have, the coalitions that we have, the community, the media, teacher unions, right? Everybody who's engaged in our work, so often we are not working in harmony. And it would be very interesting to ask you the question about how can we ensure that what we see as being desirable is going to be successful. So that's part 3. And again, I'm going to finally ask each of our panel members if they'll give us their one big takeaway message. Okay, put on your hats as WISE advisors. And others, I'm encouraging you to do the same. So, that's the approach. Let me go, before we go any further, I've got one microphone going here so that in fact I can pick up on a question or a comment.
Hi, my name is Shahida Salim, and I actually head an innovations program in Pakistan. And my first question to everybody in the audience, but specifically the speakers, is what actually do we mean by innovation?
Beautiful. Thank you. So we'll address that very question in this first part of the conversation. Florence, let me come to you. I'm in your head, a huge, complex, entire system of education in France. So if you are faced with the question, what is the case for innovation, and what do we mean by innovation? And then can you give us some examples of where you feel the system is responding to what you'd see as being positive innovation?
Not so easy to define innovation. And first of all, I don't think that innovation is always good. I saw by my eyes, I saw very bad innovations. Yeah. I think that we will address this question in the last part, and I will really want to ask and to think about improvement and innovation. That means something to me. Let me take a concrete example, which is my everyday work. We actually are transforming in France the lower secondary schools, especially in deprived areas. And we are implementing changes drawn directly from some very good innovation practiced by school on several years. So, for example, giving more pedagogical autonomy to the schools, and also implementing a systemic evolution, because we tried years after years to implement some evolution, a small one, giving some autonomy to a school, but not being able to, comment on dit, diffuser? To diffuse, well, so to diffuse these innovation on other schools. The main purpose is that you have a good idea with a teacher, a school, a principal in this school, but how do you manage to diffuse this idea to other persons who are not directly implicated in this innovation? So we try to implement a systemic evolution, for example, on key points, a new curriculum, a new method of assessing the students, tailored supports for students on every stage, on every level of education, also involving students in collective work, projects, practical realization, and also focusing. I will say some words about it later. Focusing, which is very important, on engagement, how to engage the students in learning, and also in citizenship, in new citizenship in a very changing world. I think that's, and also don't forget it, digital literacy, which is very important. So, how we manage to implement all those things together? Because I really think that if you try to implement just one thing in one place at one time, it doesn't work. We tried that years after years, and nothing changed, really. So this year, we decided to do all that things together at the same time in the same place. So, of course, like every time in France, it's a big revolution, a lot of strikes and so on, which is a very national game, as you know. But I'm quite confident, because we have a lot of teacher training, conference, pedagogical resources, and so on. So it's a very huge program. Perhaps I can tell you something later.
No, that's great. Well, let me just, the Twitter feed is already starting to be active. Let me just ask you one question that effectively is before me. What you just indicated is that you are capable as an education system of innovating from within. The challenge of this question is, can an education system innovate from within?
What does it mean from within? Is it the educational system is not a closed system at this time, of course, because we are completely connected with other educational system, with the society, with the entrepreneurs, with the association, and so on, the municipalities. So we are completely connected. So of course, but the real problem is that even when you know that you have to change, and you know where you have to go, it's not so easy to move.
Okay,
and that's really a political and a management problem. It's not a theoretical one.
No. Okay, and we'll come back to that in part 3. Joe, it's interesting that Florence picked up the question about diffusion and spread. I'm not asking you to respond to that explicitly, but in the report, you do lay out the case for innovation and why it is so important.
We do. When we talk about how the education system needs to be able to adapt new ideas rather than just adopt new ideas, because learning is predicated on human relationships, and that requires different types of adaptation methods. Returning to your question, we define innovation as the successful exploitation of new ideas. That can go in many different directions, but that's our basic definition. But the case for change, the case for innovation in our education systems does need to be made. Although we were positive when we began the report, we wanted to go back a bit and say the first line of the report was, you are the minister. You have a number of priorities. Why should innovation be anywhere in your in-tray, let alone near the top? And we divided that question into 2 parts. First of all, what's the case for innovation? And secondly, what's the case for a systemic approach to innovation? And they are 2 quite different questions. In terms of the case for innovation, I think it's very clear. It's clear from what we've heard already today. Generally, the current system is not working fast enough to improve outcomes for all. We know the data on less advanced economies, less advanced education systems. It's going to just take too long to reach where we need to go. But also, more advanced education systems, their current reform efforts are really having diminishing returns. So even within the current improvement parameters and paradigm, the case for innovation, I think, is very strong. If you move then to a transformation agenda, now I know the language of transformation can be quite off-putting, but if we just say we want a different kind of society, therefore we want different kind of learners, therefore we need different types of processes and methods to get those different kinds of learners. If we make it as open as that, then I think the case for innovation becomes even stronger.
Have you got a couple of examples where, if I put you on the spot and said, this is what I mean by innovation, both kinds of innovation, if you like?
Yeah. I think one was, in terms of doing the report, and I'm going to talk about promising examples rather than completed examples. People always talk about British Columbia and Ontario, and we've heard these again and again, but we just identified a couple of promising ones that are not, I wouldn't vouch for their impact yet. Surprisingly, and I'm wondering if other people know more about this than me, but we talked to somebody in Nigeria, a Centre for Partnerships in Education in Nigeria, and I think there's some interesting work going on there at a city level and at some state levels to kind of blend, particularly to blend private and public education in various ways. But also in Nigeria, that's supported by a group of international schools who are also trying to mobilize their assets for social good. And I think that's particularly interesting in terms of the blend you might get there. The other thing the other area I think is very interesting is in the US, the Cities of Learning initiative, which really tries to mobilize all of the assets of a city, whether it's businesses, cultural organizations, schools and others, to support the learning of adolescents. It's mainly for 14 to 25-year-olds. The most interesting thing about that is when I've talked to a couple of people involved, because we're trying to export that model to the UK at the moment, which of those institutions do you think are the most challenging to work with in terms of developing a new ecosystem of learning? It's the schools. The schools are those that are most resistant to developing that type of partnership.
Gilbert, maybe pick up on what you've heard and just take it to another level, because I do think it'll help the conversation if we know what we mean by innovation and the 2 types, and the interrelationship with society, with economy, exactly the points that you were making in your opening comments.
Yeah, but just to also capture a little bit what I've seen in the morning. In most sessions, we're almost in agreement that we need more to integrate more innovation into our education systems, through our teaching techniques and approaches, through our classroom management, through our relationship between the school and the community, digital technology. I feel there is an agreement on this. But strange enough that we're also in agreement that education systems are deteriorating and they're less responsive to the needs of actual global and local context challenges. There's something missing in this process. So for me, innovation, to pick up on this, is a disruption in an ecosystem or a process that would create a greater value. So it needs to be something that would shift a certain existing paradigm, and by shifting it, being at the school level or being at the public institutions level, it should be creating a new opportunity where there is no possibility, if I can put it in a different way. I'm afraid that reforms in the world, and we cannot take the few Western countries that are part of the first world and still they're suffering, as being the models of education systems in the world. Because a lot of things I hear now between France and the UK or the US, I think they're not reflective of the global situation of education. One important thing is that I feel before thinking of any innovation within education, I feel there is a precondition, political innovation. If our politicians and policymakers are not equipped to allow innovation, I don't think we can aspire for any innovation in our societies. We can have some good examples. We can have a good case study of one school, one community. But on a system level, to go systemic, on a system level, no, we did not succeed yet in scaling up innovations that are on a private level because we couldn't translate it into policy. And this is why, for me, the case for change would be, for example, in my experience in Tunisia, where we succeeded in making impact, is that because the policymaker was ready to say, oh, you know, I'm willing to try it. I'm well educated. I feel it might create value. I'm happy to do it. So we tried to see what are sources of instability. It's poverty in rural areas. So lack of employment, as well as government not capable of responding to local needs. And then what we did is we tried to link up education to this by introducing engineering, a social entrepreneurship curricula for undergrad and graduate studies, but also that is fit, that is built on a market study that we did to see what are exact needs for these students to go back into their communities, be innovative, solve social problems, and create businesses, social enterprises that generate revenue.
So can we pick up
Sure.
on that?
Can I just give one other example?
Just so I
Yeah.
remember, when we come back to the politics of education in part
Sure.
3, both of you have identified this, so I want to return to that, but I just want to complete a kind of opening sense of what the territory is that we're trying to explore. So can I just come back on one point before I go to Shrath? And that is this. Joe has said we have got a system that has diminishing returns, right? Gilbert has said we've got a deteriorating system. Now, you've also made a distinction.
That's what Michelle Obama said.
Exactly. And we've got a distinction between how effective those systems are in different jurisdictions in the world, yeah? But Florence, just from your perspective, in an advanced economy, right, and society, how do you respond to the argument, just before I come to Sharath, how do you respond to the argument that you are experiencing either diminishing returns or a deteriorating system? What's your response to that?
Advices for politicians or policymakers are very useful, but are quite easy to say. It's not so easy to do.
Right.
So, for example, when you are responsible, like me, for 12 millions of pupils, of students, and 1 million teachers, not so easy to move on the way. We know, I think, exactly where we have to go. We know exactly where the challenges are and what we have to implement to do better. But there is something like a consensus of I think, a lot of people in an advanced society just not to move because it's very, how can I say, it's useful for them, you know. Not everybody is interested in changing because for a lot of people,
Yeah.
the actual situation
Yeah.
is quite great.
So they need a compelling
the
case
problem
and a
is,
vision.
yes,
Yeah.
the problem is how you foster the whole society on solidarity, and you say that if you give more for those who have less, it will be comment on dit bénéficier? It will benefit to everybody.
Okay. Okay.
That's the main problem
Yeah.
in our society,
All right.
because it works a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah. I want to bring Shareth in as well, but did you want to do a quick... By the way, Shareth, can I make it clear? You'll get plenty of time. Okay, yeah.
If you look at school reform efforts around the world, they tend to be successful on a smaller level. So my question is it beneficial, is it desirable or realistic for one person and one department to be responsible for so many learners and so many teachers?
Okay, so let's keep that to later, yeah? Because I keep on saying there's part 3 to come, yeah? Okay, but Shareth, can I put you in a different category here than either responsible for a system or those who are advisors or experts or partners in change? You are, I think, a change maker, and you have chosen to shift the system, but not through a administrative, bureaucratic... That's inevitable.
I'm not a bureaucrat.
Hold on, I didn't
Please,
mean that in a
an
pejorative...
administrator. Be careful.
I will be careful now. I tell you what, I was going to be careful, I'll be even more careful
I'm
now.
not so fluent in English, but I can understand some things.
It's a good sign where bureaucrats refuse to be bureaucrats.
By the way, I don't mean bureaucrat as being pejorative. Okay?
I'm not so sure.
Shareth, come, save me. Come in.
No, I need to save Tony now. So, no, but I think, this is my 5th WISE, and my absolute favorite quote from a WISE conference a couple of years ago was someone who stood up and said, it was at the end of a long opening speech, said it's time to stop talking about transforming education systems and time to start talking about improving classrooms. And I think that's really, all of the evidence suggests that what really makes a difference to whether kids learn or not is the quality and commitment of their teachers. But in the countries I work in, I try to be a change maker. I do my best, but never feel it's enough. But in India and Uganda, 1 in 4 teachers doesn't even show up on a given school day. When they're in school, less than half their time is spent teaching. Even that's pretty appalling quality. So what's happened, I think, is education systems in desperation, I don't mean this in any negative sense, but have tried all kinds of clever carrots and sticks to try and get teachers to behave well. So one, in many states in India, as a teacher, I would be biometrically fingerprinted when I walk into school, like an old factory assembly line. In other states, they've tried getting kids to take pictures of teachers during the day with a time and date stamp on it. That gets beamed into a satellite, and someone up above can enforce teachers showing up to school, for example. It just shows how crazy the world has become, that we need to think about these kinds of innovations. These are not good innovations. In my view, they don't sustain. And so what we're doing with STIR, the organization I run, is trying to take a very different paradigm, a different approach. Rather than think of teachers as the problem, how can we make them the solution? Rather than thinking about top-down, externally driven reform, how can we create a genuine movement from within the teaching profession itself? And rather than try to play with carrots and sticks, how can we bring back the intrinsic motivation of teaching? And what we're doing is really creating this ground, this mass movement, working currently with 12,000 teachers. We excite them about the profession again, get them to form local networks where they share innovations, but also work with each other, collaborate to improve the quality of their classrooms, and over time act as good peers in the system. We want to get to 120,000 teachers over the next 5 years, 4.5 million kids. We want to tip teaching, get to 10% of the teacher base, so teachers themselves shift their profession, bring back its moral purpose, bring back this most noble of professions as well.
Shareth, let me ask you this, as I come out to everybody else. There's sometimes shorthand that's used, which I know is inadequate, but we've talked about innovation and change that's top-down or bottom-up or lateral, and we've talked about reinventing the middle tier. I now hear a lot more conversation about a profession-led reform agenda, profession-led innovation. school-led, if you like. And it's a question then about how you are thinking about this in terms of the system dimension. I thought Joe was really clear on that in fact we can be thinking about innovation at multiple levels. But if we're actually genuinely thinking about a more network-based system where the profession is front and centre, is that your ambition?
I think that's what feels like medicine have done, Tony. So if you think about how doctors work, for example, they run their profession. They do the evidence, the clinical trials that gets published. They change their practice. They've got, in the UK, for example, Royal Colleges that act as bodies for teachers that are not unions, for example.
Okay, let me open this up. We've got a couple of microphones here.
I'm Philippe Poitreau, and I'm a French teacher. Innovation is a kind of deviancy. How can you be a deviant in the system? That's my question.
Thank you very much. Great, let me come to you here.
I'm working on a startup in the UK on parental engagement. Why are parents not included in the discussion around innovation for education? And if not, so why are they not included in this discussion?
Thank you. Wonderful. I mean, any panel member can respond in a moment. Let me get a few more.
I would like to build on that. My question is, why does always, globally, the first budget cut happen in the creative classes? So we all talk about innovation, and we need it for, skill-based vocational trainings afterwards, after higher education in high schools. And why does always in primary and secondary education the arts budget suffer so much? Where does innovation come from? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen Anderson. I'm a digital learning and social media consultant from the U.S. So when we talk about innovation, we often talk about systems, we often talk about teachers, we talk about classrooms. People we don't talk about are kids. Where do kids fit in this equation? Because a lot of times kids are innovating despite things that are happening in their schools. There's some great examples of kids in the U.S. There's a kid who created a Braille machine for his school out of Legos, even though his science teacher told him it was something that didn't fit inside his curriculum. So he went and he did it anyway. And my fear is we talk about innovating education, but it's going to change for the worse for kids, and we're just going to keep pushing kids away from school. Even though we're trying, we're going to keep continuing pushing kids away. So how do we bring kids into that conversation to help spur innovation?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Please.
Hessel Noemi. Although I do acknowledge that the top-down approach to innovation in the education system is not the only way, I do think it plays a large role in the Arab world. And Gilbert, I have a question for you. What about language? Can you be innovative in a foreign language? We know that the rise of English as a lingua franca in the Arab world is one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with. It's a huge complexity that we're still trying to understand. And so, considering that, do you think that innovation is possible in a foreign language? And if so, why? If not, why?
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Tanjilut from Bangladesh. I'm working at BRAC. I'd like to know, we are talking about innovation, we are doing innovations, but what are those qualitative indicators, how that will help us to measure the innovation that is really happening? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Thomas. I work in Oman. It's a follow-up on your question. You cannot talk about innovation in isolation of context and culture. Very often we lose sight of diversity that influences learning, focusing on globalization.
Yep.
Okay? To give that young lady an example, one of the problems I had was my English teacher saying that these kids cannot learn English. They find it difficult to learn English. I said, have you studied the right to left writing orientation of the Arabic language influencing learning of English? So we did a research with remarkable results. 16% of the students we investigated could read a mirror image of an English paragraph faster than they could read left to right writing. So there are issues of culture and context.
Thank
and
you.
Innovation cannot be in isolation of both.
Thank you. And I've got a final contribution here, and then I'll come back. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Ghulam Samdani Fakir. I'm from Bangladesh, and I'm teaching at the university. Well, one of the comments that I would like to mention, if you really like to bring innovations in the education system, along with others, teachers need to first be changed. because the kind of mindset that we have, our teachers, it is not really consistent with the 21st century challenges. So how can we really bring changes in the mindset of our teachers? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to let the panel determine what they'll respond to, and briefly. So, Shareth.
So maybe I'll respond to the first question because I think I'm a kind of deviant kind of guy, I think. So our model really is about, with STIR, positive deviance. And what's sad, and perhaps the gentleman's last comment, if you're a teacher who cares now in a system, it's not cool anymore. And a lot of researchers were baffled, why are teachers showing up to these network meetings out of school? They're not paid any extra, but we're getting 80-90% attendance all the time. It's because they feel oxygen from other teachers. And there's an environment where they feel supported and can find like-minded peers, and energy can spread. We believe shift social norms in schools to be much more learning-friendly and much more caring.
Thank you. Others, do you want to pick up on student, parents?
A couple of things. It's interesting. Why students are not involved, why parents are not involved. Who's involved? Is anyone involved in our education systems, in our schools, other than the teacher, a top-down approach, and it comes from top-down from the Ministry of Education? Who's involved? None. But I agree, students, children should be involved in their education, and parents should be involved, but no one is today. Our education systems are very exclusive. But I wouldn't.
One more comment, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame the teachers on this because I believe we're the product of our own context. It means, I don't know if you read the book, The Lucifer Effect, the Stanford experiment. So the teachers are I was a teacher for 4 years. I was the product of a larger system that tells me what's right, what's wrong, what I'm allowed, what I'm not allowed, how I get remunerated, how my performance is being measured. I have no room for innovation. Why should I? Sometimes I was punished for my innovation. If I do things that are extracurricular, I'm punished for that. So why should I? So this is why I want to go back to the bottom line, is that something that have to change from top down. Otherwise, I think we're going to keep on saying we're all in agreement, but no one decides. Okay.
You might have to take the question about language offline. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, did you want to respond?
Well, of course I don't agree with you. Yeah. Not on the evidence you say, because I agree that a top-down reform and so on is not useful nowadays. But I think that everybody knows that, and I don't know. I can't see in countries a lot of reforms completely implemented like top-down reforms. So, for example, we have a very large consultation on everybody, on websites and so on, big symposium, and everybody, the parents, the kids, the teachers, the society could say what they want to do with school. I think that fundamentally in France is something very important. The school is at the very center of the nation. Nation is based on school. So everybody wants to be a minister of education, knows exactly what to do for his kids, for her kids. But is it really convenient for everybody? Of course, there is a political issue on education, and politicians have to say what they want to do with school. What is the contract between the nation and the school? So it's not only a matter of each citizen. It's a society matter, and we have to build some consensus, and that's what I want to say. But perhaps later about what is our priority.
Okay, Joe.
I'll answer two that haven't been answered, if that's okay.
Okay.
On indicators, we thought about working this through. It's very, very difficult. I mean, there are some indicators out there already. For instance, the OECD TALIS surveys of teachers shows that across the world, only a quarter of teachers feel they would be rewarded for innovation, and that's broken down country by country. We think we can do something at school level, but probably not at system level. But I'd love to kind of hear other people's ideas. Just on the arts, because I don't want it to be further marginalised, but I think the arts is being doubly marginalised. it's got a historical it's got a history of neglect in our curriculum for years and years. But also, what I'm finding in all the debates we're having on creativity and innovation at the moment, people are so desperate to say creativity is not about the arts, they almost forget the power, the unique power of the arts and design in that process. We're going to put our 9 next steps for change up in a moment. My 10th would be for emerging and all education systems in terms of innovation would be to start with the arts. I cannot believe you would ever find a school which is really strong on innovation which didn't have at its heart a very, very good art and design department.
Well, that's perfect connection. Let's go to the next section of the conversation and try and identify where you would put your effort, your energy, your investment in terms of priorities and actions to bring about a more innovative environment, which we are presuming now will mean more powerful learning systems in the service of excellence and equity. I want to get the argument right, yeah? It's not just innovation for innovation's sake, right? And it's not bad innovation, even though we have to risk ourselves a lot, and we don't expect innovation to succeed. In fact, exactly the reverse many times as we attempt to fall forward. So, Joe, you've written an entire report here with the Innovation Unit. That's great. But let's bring up the one slide, colleagues, that at least just has a sense of where you would put your energy. And can you do this in 2 minutes?
I will only choose 3. I'd also, in terms of failure, I've always wanted to write some chaos studies as well as case studies. One day I'll have the confidence to do that. And your point about context and culture is vital here. These 9 next steps, you can pick and choose which are most relevant to your context. I thought about my own context here, which was we run 5 academy schools in a deprived part of England in the West Midlands. And I thought if I was a principal and I wanted to develop a more innovative culture in my school, what would I really want government to do differently? And from that, I chose 3 there. First of all, I would want some outward as well as upward accountability. So I'm not just part of a food chain of accountability to inspectorate and to national government. I want to negotiate accountability with my community, with parents, and with pupils as well. Secondly, I would want genuine space for curriculum design. Every government has a national curriculum, that's fair enough, but you really need space locally to generate your curriculum in addition to that. And thirdly, I would focus on how you can develop teachers' innovative capacities from the start of their careers all the way through. I think there's ways to do that, making sure that they work in research-rich environments as well. And I think that would be particularly useful for my academies in the UK.
Fantastic. I'm going to take Joe as the model of the response. Yes. So, Florence, see if we can name your 2 or 3. I know it's complex, but to help the conversation.
Yes, that's what I want to say. It's great ideas, and we all agree with that, and we try to implement that. And my real question is how you manage to implement evolution, not through official instructions and programs like that. So that's what you have to do, because everybody in the world agree we have to put on these 9 steps. Of course, but when you are doing that with 1 million teachers, it's not so easy. So what I think really is that we have to manage evolution not through programs and great ideas like that, but through sharing fundamental values. Teachers, children, parents, the whole society. And for example, let me take the example of my country, sorry, but as you know, in France, I could say since the French Revolution or the Enlightenment philosophers, we put the values of our country, which are freedom, equality, yes, and of course brotherhood, fraternité. Voilà. We put these values at the very heart of our nation, and the school at the very center of our nation. But you know, after the terrorist attacks in Paris, Charlie Hebdo, perhaps you remember that, we discovered that these values are not so well shared in the whole society. And so now we have to face a big question, that is, how do we teach values? How do we make all the children of the citizens share the same values? For example, what does it mean, solidarity or brotherhood in a society? That means in a society which is not so équitable or equitable. That's a very important thing. And so what is more important to me is to make the teacher and the parents share this, and the children share the same values. And so, for example, how do we engage the students to the new citizenship and the understanding of our mutual, collective, common citizenship? How to develop critical thinking? How and critical mind? How to develop the thinking for oneself, which is very important, not to hear, for example, on internet, some very special things that you can read or hear. And that's the main problem for me. Also, of course, everything that's obvious is important. But values are most fundamental. You can implement changes if everybody agree on the same values.
Florence, just as Sharath, as you picked this story up, it's interesting that in conversations we've been having globally about, going back to the point about a curriculum and a values base, that many have been quoting the idea of 6 C's: citizenship, character, communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking. I mean, when you think about what you've just said, that as a global curriculum, right, that is obviously reflective of the values of a particular country, going back to context and culture, is a pretty powerful recipe. So, Sharath.
So, just to provoke a little bit, I think we are building a movement at STIR, a teacher-led movement for change from within the system. But one of our painful bits of learning is the importance of building the right enabling environment in systems for teachers. Just one a very practical example, we came across an amazing teacher in one of our networks. After many months, it took about 6 months of cajoling, he shifted his classroom around, much more interactive, much more group work. Kids are really enjoying their learning and doing really well. His district official came in to do an inspection that morning, shouted at him, and within literally 30 seconds, the classroom went back. It was almost like watching a sci-fi movie or something as well. And we asked, we kind of asked the district official why shout at him. He said, "I'm worried my state inspector will come in, look at this school, and shout at me and fire me because I'm not doing my job." And I think there's this idea really of looking at how can we build a permission to innovate, a culture, but a permission within the system at different levels. And we realized we've got to not just build a movement of teachers, but build a movement of policy change makers as well. And so all the things we've found work with teachers, simple things like local recognition, training, the chance to feel special, the chance to learn new techniques, and all support each other in systems is what we're building now and finding it's early days, but big success. So our big lesson has been we often in education obsess about structures. We've learned to focus on people, and we believe people in the system will change structures over time.
Brilliant, thank you. Gilbert.
Just thinking of the Middle East, North Africa, and the Gulf, first thing would be curriculum. We're stuck in between both either curricula that's very archaic, conservative, promotes values of less openness, I would say, or importing Western curricula that does not talk to our context. I think number one would be curriculum design, something that's contextual at the same time progressive and talks to the needs in the world. The second would be teachers as well. Similar, but I think it's a different context. I think I'm very conscious of the importance of teachers in the classroom. At the same time, within the system, I still feel it's difficult. I think we need to be innovative in the entry door of how can we empower these teachers while getting them out of the system they live in. Probably on a short term, I would say investing more in informal education, unfortunately, because I feel with what's happening in the Arab world now, I think betting on the formal one might be too far away. At least we can compensate in the coming decade maybe, so that we don't lose a whole generation by focusing on informal education to make sure that some skills, values, competencies are acquired for the modern world.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to come out to others now. And can I ask you to do it in this spirit? Because we could have a conversation about remodeling the profession, expanding the workforce, formal, informal, existing providers, new providers. I mean, this is, if you want to stick around, we're going through until about 8 o'clock tonight. So, but can I ask you each, as you comment, can you just give us your priority? Or at least try and add to the conversation. And I've got a microphone going over here.
My question is, I've always seen people looking for the one solution, the model that will work. And given the diversity of people's situation, looking for excellence and for equity, shouldn't it be a diversity of solution? I don't often see at a city level, there could be maybe 10 models that work together, and the combination of diverse model would be a way to explore. And depending on who you are as a parent, as a kid, and as a teacher, maybe you find a place where you will teach better. And the combination, I'm looking at this, I think a book about smart cities by Tom van der Ark, trying to do this in the US. This way of diversity, looking for excellence and looking for equity, with the government to look after this equity and this excellence, but many ways, not one solution. There's not one solution. I haven't seen it in any country. And when you try to copy other countries, you do it wrong.
Okay, hold the microphone. Let me just check on one thing. Shareth was saying, but you need an enabling environment. So when you think about multiple solutions, do you have a ecosystem in mind, or do you have a context in which you are thinking about the systemness factor that Florence talked about?
So small example, but we're launching new schools at the time being, small school, vocational ones. But what we do this is we bring together around the table every single person in the ecosystem.
Right.
And we have a big fight for many days
Yeah.
about, is it useful? Do we need this kind of thing? How should we do it? And it's only when everyone agree, like private sector, public sector, local authorities, that then you start the program and try. But it is
So it is a collaborative process.
but it's only one small
Understood.
part of an answer to many others
Yeah.
which are needed.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. No, sorry. I'm going to go to people that I promised to come back. Yeah, you're right there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janet Marks. I come from South Africa, Johannesburg, and I feel that we need to address something that's far more important than any of us sitting here, and that is the teaching profession, certainly in South Africa, and I would imagine globally, is aging. We've just come from a situation, fees must fall in South Africa, where students have taken on the universities. And I don't know if you've been following us, if we're so famous around the world. But on the social media, our youth are taking a stand. They're not waiting for us.
Yeah.
And somehow I think we're going to have to think about how do we listen to that voice? How do we bring on the social media with an aging teaching population who, by and large, I'm not as gloomy as everybody else in the room. I think they do try. But I think we need to listen more carefully to what's moving in the social media space and making innovation in that stream.
Yeah, we could have an entire debate about the demand side and actually bypassing the system.
Hi, it's Shahida again. I think innovation doesn't happen in isolation. And so when we're talking about collaboration, there were two very conspicuously missing voices here. One is the private sector. And what role do they play in education system innovation? How can they help us create solutions? The other is ownership, and who actually owns education. Is it government? Is it all of us? Is it the teachers? Who actually owns education? And those are the people who are responsible for implementing the innovations we're talking about. I think we're missing some of the pieces in that jigsaw.
Thank you.
I think we need to prioritize teaching kids to teach themselves, because I think that once a child's imagination is sparked, they only need a teacher to innovate, to inspire them. But once they have that spark in their mind, they have the internet, they have so much technology that they can teach themselves. There's nothing that they can't do by themselves. If they're interested in something, they can find out whatever they need to know. And especially in this country, right now, I have been homeschooling myself for maybe half a year, and I teach myself everything I need to know. I mean, children can teach themselves. They don't always need teachers to teach them every single step.
Thank you.
I'm with Geneva Global, a philanthropic consulting firm. And my question is maybe a question and an answer partly, but tagging on to a colleague there who has asked, where is the voice? We're missing some voices. And we're in the private sector and we're funding innovative solutions in education. But on the other hand, we'd like to see a better involvement with government, because we feel that while national curriculums are owned by government, there is room for us to innovate. But we want the government to have a larger voice, a larger participation in this space of innovation. Otherwise, the question of ownership comes back to the table and makes it really difficult for us to move forward.
I'm just looking at the clock, and I've got a few constraints here, and I do want to ask each of you, as you think about what's being said, we had a part 3 in the conversation which really goes to the heart, I think, Florence, of your opening remarks. Yeah? And I want to read something that has been tweeted. It says, Tony, you started down the road about a system being able to innovate from within, but clearly they think that I then fudged it. Why should we believe education can transform itself? No one has yet offered evidence of the ability to change truly from within. So I want to ask each of you this question as your final question. And I think I'm going to ask you not only to respond to this, but also to give me your takeaway message at the same time. Okay, so 2 parts. And this is pretty tough. So Florence, let me start with you. If it is true, as I think you have encouraged us to think about, that there's a common agenda amongst many countries, even though there's differences. We know something about how we can get to high performance, even though it's true that we are changing the definition of high performance. The real challenge is in the implementation. Now, if you are thinking as a leader in partnership with others, not some kind of top-down approach at all, in partnership with others, what do you think will make the difference about shifting our learning system with innovation as a driver? What will really make the difference so that you feel you are not challenged by the problems of the transfer and diffusion? Because that really is a major issue for us about how we get whole system change. So what would you do in order to get that implementation more successfully executed?
Well, I think I say something about it 2 minutes before. I'm completely convinced that we have to, sorry for the repetition, that we have to convince the whole citizen that it is useful for everybody. So changing, transforming, evolving is useful for the whole society. Not obviously for you or for your children. But if it's useful for the whole society, it will be useful for you or your children later. Yeah. And so I think it's the main purpose. And so also for the teachers, yes, it will change your work, your way of working, your way of teaching, your approach, but it will be better for the whole society and even for your position afterwards. And so. And the second point is, please let us some long time working. Because we, even in my position, talking with politicians, talking with the trade unions, the teacher union, talking with everybody wants some change, not the same, of course, not in the same direction, but for tomorrow or yesterday. And please, all the experts, let us some long time working. Yes. No, that doesn't mean it will change 2 years, not at a very long time. But we need time. And as you know, it's so easy to say a few words about what to do, but. It is, I think, really that it's very difficult for teachers and specialists to explain the pedagogical issue simply. So that's why it's not so efficient, I think. So, and for the last word, I will say to politicians and policymakers, please don't be afraid to have enemies. Because at the end of your career, if you have no enemies, that proves that you have done nothing. And for myself, I have a lot of enemies, so I'm very happy.
Florence, thank you very much. Gilbert, have a go.
Honestly, we don't have time. Violence is rising by the day. Social instability, unemployment. No, we don't. And I don't think, I think we've given enough time to the same mindset to innovate. I, especially in this part of the world and probably in other parts of the world, no, we do not have time anymore. And you're not, and policymakers and all. And like Einstein says, no problem can be solved with the same consciousness that created it. So we cannot solve the same problems with the same people who created these. So probably my take would be, probably we shall reform policymakers before any innovation policies. So before any policies reform. And probably we should think of, rather being, and I like what Luis said, probably we should think along the lines of innovation to change political will, rather than innovation to change education systems. Because if we had the same conversation on health, on water, on human rights, we would have gone through the same conversation. We all know the solutions. We've done all our research. We have a policy and a strategy for every country in the Arab world. They're all in the drawers. There is no political will to change.
No,
this is why we need disruption, but creative one and positive one.
Okay. I want to precise, but perhaps
then
I don't
I'm
express
my
myself
colleague.
very
Okay.
good, but I don't say we have time and we will change later in 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years. Yes, of course we have to change now. But But of course you know that to raise or to educate a child, it needs 10 or 15 years. So the main problem is everybody has good ideas and wants to see the effects, the indicators, and so on next month, next year. But it's not possible. So we have to be confident on teachers. We have to be confident on the society, but to be very volunteer. Is that good?
Yeah.
Yes. So we have to know exactly where we want to go, to train teachers, to speak to your whole society, and to really to make improvement the global politics. I think, but you can't see the effect next week or next month. It needs time to raise or to educate a child. Don't forget it.
Okay, Anne. Sure.
So I'm a terrible gardener if anyone comes to my backyard at home. But I'm just going to use a gardening metaphor to close. That I think often in education we think about innovation as seeds. What's the next silver bullet? We often don't think about the soil though. How do we make sure the soil is fertile? We have willing, open, receptive teachers, receptive policymakers, both nationally but also locally. So how do you build that soil to... And my sector in particular is horrendous at what I call pilotitis, building stuff, not planting seeds on the main soil, going off and finding a separate allotment in beautiful conditions. So my other plea is that we actually start to work with the messy reality of the real world, work in the soil. We'll make mistakes, we'll learn, but it'll be a much better way to get long-term sustainability in how we change systems over time.
Thank you. And Joe, let me just pick up on something that you've connected with a couple of tweets that have come through. It goes to the point that I think Florence is raising. People are saying that there is now a sense of new partnership. There are multiple players, government, we've had a call for, but surely this is happening. Business, philanthropists, social entrepreneurs, young people are all now part of this conversation. You're saying that's at the heart of the French system, and increasingly people are saying you can't do this work unless it is collaborative, it is a partnership. There are new players in education. You'll never shift the system unless, in fact, you embrace that. So as you think about the report and a way forward, how are we going to do it? And quite frankly, there does seem to be a desire for some acceleration, going to your point about speed.
Yeah, I mean, our report asked for an approach to innovation that was long-term focused, equity-centred, teacher-powered and humanising. And I think the long-term focus, I do agree with you on that. But I think your point about values is a brilliant artefact, is a brilliant challenge through which we can think through all of this. Because all systems face this challenge. And are we going to implement our way to shared values, or are we going to innovate our way to shared values? And I think the only way to do it is through innovation, because of the demands of young people that you talked about. And the only way to do for the state to manage that innovation is to see itself as a curator rather than a controller of that innovation. And that means the role of the state, the role of government, is to bring in really interesting new partnerships between the private sector, the voluntary sector and others, making sure that teachers are at the heart of that process, because you can't do innovation within or without. You need a combination of both. The final thing I'd say is if there's one area I think where WISE and others can really collaborate and possibly go where governments fear to tread around innovation, it's around assessment. I think assessment is the next huge challenge for innovation.
Colleagues, one, forgive me to those who I didn't manage to get the microphone to. Two, thank you for the participation of all of you in this panel session. And three, would you join with me in thanking our wonderful panel? Thank you very much.